A military bomber disappears over Alaska in broad daylight, and the search that followed uncovered something the crew never knew was coming. March 1950, the U.S. Army Air Forces operated a routine transport corridor between bases in Alaska, ferrying supplies and personnel across some of the continent's most unforgiving terrain. On March 21st, a B-29 Superfortress call sign Lady of the Lake departed from Elmendorf Air Force Base near Anchorage at 5:23 in the morning. The flight plan was straightforward: head northeast toward Fairbanks, a hop of roughly 260 miles. Captain Robert Hobson was at the controls, aboard with 10 crew members, and as far as anyone on the ground knew, a routine cargo manifest. The weather forecast looked manageable. Ice and wind were expected, yes, but nothing the B-29 couldn't handle. What the crew of the Lady of the Lake didn't know, and what ground control hadn't yet realized either, was that the weather system moving across the Alaskan interior that morning was intensifying faster than forecasts predicted. The radio operators on the ground were tracking the flight, but communication was intermittent. That was normal in 1950. Radio blackouts over remote terrain lasted minutes, sometimes longer. No one was alarmed. Yet. By 7:15 a.m., the Lady of the Lake should have been approaching Fairbanks. The radio crackled. A brief transmission came through. The crew reported they were in heavy icing conditions and climbing to find clearer air. Standard procedure. Then silence. Not the usual static, interrupted silence. Complete silence. The operators waited. 15 minutes passed. 30. At 7:50 a.m., Fairbanks Tower tried to raise the aircraft. No response. The alarm went up the chain of command within the hour. Search and rescue mobilized immediately. This was Alaska in 1950, not the networked, satellite-tracked landscape we know today. A missing aircraft over the interior meant launching planes into conditions almost as treacherous as those that took the B-29 down. The search radius widened. Days passed. No wreckage, no signal fires, no radio beacon. The crews flying the search sorties were looking at a vast, white, featureless expanse. Mountains, valleys, frozen lakes, all of it blanketed in fresh snow. March 24th, 3 days in, the search had expanded to cover over 50,000 square miles. The military was throwing resources at it: P-51 Mustangs, other transport planes, ground teams preparing to hike into the backcountry if a location could be pinpointed. But pinpointing anything in that terrain was nearly impossible. The crew of the Lady of the Lake had vanished. Families of the 10 men aboard were notified. The press picked up the story. Missing bomber over Alaska. It had the weight of genuine tragedy. Now here's where the story takes a turn, and this is the detail that gets overlooked in most accounts. On March 27th, a week into the search, a pilot flying a reconnaissance sortie spotted something on the surface of a frozen lake in the remote Talkeetna Mountains region. It was wreckage, a B-29. The location was so isolated that ground teams couldn't reach it for days. When they finally did, what they found was both horrifying and, in a strange way, instructive. The B-29 had come down hard on the ice. The fuselage was broken into sections, the wings were twisted. But the recovery teams, when they examined the wreckage closely, found something unusual in the cockpit area and the forward fuselage. Ice, not just surface frost, deep structural ice, the kind that builds up when an aircraft is caught in severe icing conditions for an extended period. This wasn't a mechanical failure, this was atmospheric. The Lady of the Lake had been slowly crushed by its own weight as ice accumulated on the wings and fuselage. 10 crew members were recovered from the wreckage. The investigation that followed, and here's the small irony I mentioned, revealed that Captain Hobson had actually made a sound decision when he reported climbing to find clearer air. The problem was that the icing layer extended higher than the weather data predicted. The B-29 kept climbing into worse conditions. Every 1,000 feet added more ice, more drag, less lift. Eventually, the aircraft became uncontrollable. What's stored in the archives now, and I've held these files myself, handled the original investigation summaries, is a meticulous account of how forecasting gaps in 1950 could have fatal consequences. The Weather Office had predicted icing, but they hadn't predicted how severe or how high it would extend. The B-29 was doing exactly what training dictated. The crew wasn't reckless, they were unlucky and uninformed. There's a difference, and it matters for how we remember them. The broader impact of the Lady of the Lake's loss rippled through the military aviation community. Icing protocols were re-examined, weather forecasting in remote regions was expanded, training for high-altitude escape procedures was refined. None of that brought the crew back, but it meant that future crews flying the same routes had better information and better procedures. That's how aviation safety advances, one tragedy, one investigation, one lesson at a time. The Lady of the Lake remains one of those cases that sits in a peculiar category. It's not unsolved, we know what happened, but it's not quite famous either. No miraculous survival, no conspiracy, just a convergence of forecasting limitations, atmospheric physics, and the unforgiving geography of Alaska. The crew made rational choices with incomplete information, and that gap between what they knew and what was actually happening, that's the real story. Subscribe, there's a new unsolved or re-examined aviation mystery every week, and each one reveals something about how we navigate risk, technology, and survival. Subscribe, there's a new unsolved or re-examined aviation mystery every week, and each one reveals something about how we navigate risk, technology, and survival.